Hey guys, it's Shane here from Echo Soundworks. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can take a really ugly sound, me grunting, and turn it into a really pretty sound like this pad. All right, so the point of this video is to show you that you really can take pretty much any sample and turn it into something that you can play a melodic passage with, whether it's chords, leads, bass, whatever it might be. So let's dive in and get started. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to find a section of the sample that is going to not, give you fits and be grumpy and hard to work with. And what I mean by that, I mean you want to find something that has a fairly consistent pitch and something that isn't bouncing all over the place in dynamics. So the first couple grunts here, they have too many different pitches. It's like, ooh, right? I don't want that. I found this section right here that was more consistent. And that's what we're going to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bounce that out, and then we are going to tune it. All right, so I tuned it in Melodyne. Didn't show that on screen because if you guys don't have Melodyne, you don't care. And if you do have Melodyne, you know how to tune things. So now we have this consistent tone. All right, the first thing I'm going to do for processing is mess around with the 4-man. So I'm going to turn the 4-man shift down a little bit, soften the sound. Now we're going to add our first distortion/saturation plugin. And the reason why it's helpful to do this when you're trying to find something melodic out of a sample, as weird and stupid as this grunt, is it helps bring out more harmonics so it can get more tonal. Now from there, I'm going to soften the sound in a reverb plugin. So the first distortion unit has a fair bit of drive. We're at like 7 or 8. And then we're going to, after we soften it with the reverb, we're going to do a little bit of light saturation. And that should sound like this now. All right, so let's bounce that in place. All right, so now we have a workable sample to try to mess around and put into our sampler. So I'm going to take it down here, and in Logic, I can just go, and we're going to do optimized because it's going to tune it for us. So now I have this. So I can start play chords already. All right, so what we need to do is we need to loop it. Now, there's 2 types of looping here. We can do a micro loop, so we're going to go and do forward for our loop. We're going to take our endpoint here, crossfade, and let's take our start point in a little bit. Now, it helps to zoom in and find 0 crossing points. That's going to be right where the audio crosses the horizontal basically the horizontal axis. So I'm going to go to my start point here until I find that. And I should have done that before I did all the crossfades. So it's about right there. That's going to help remove any pops or clicks from the beginning of the sample and also delay. So now it loops. But now there's that kind of stutter. So we can tighten up the loop by shortening it. Or we can reduce the crossfade. We're kind of find that sweet spot. All right, so let's go in and actually, let's have it follow the tempo because now I can start to slow down. Basically, I'm time stretching it. So let's slow this down. There it is. So I'm getting a little bit of a pitch difference at the end, and that's what I was talking about with choosing your sample carefully. So let's shorten the sample. All right, so now the sample sounds pretty cool. Let's play it with our MIDI. All right, so this is actually not doing what I mentioned earlier in the video, the micro looping. This is actually a normal loop, and you can get different results changing your loop pattern. So this is on forward. We can do alternate, where it'll go forwards and backwards, forwards and backwards. So that's pretty cool. Let's transpose this up an octave. All right, so it wouldn't be a proper sound design video if I didn't walk through the actual processing that I applied to make the sound how it sounds. So first up, we have a channel EQ. Try not to lose your mind over how crazy this is. I'm just cutting out some of the low frequencies. Then we have a cassette plugin by Waves Factory. Absolutely love this. It's such a cool plugin. It's just really neat. It does really awesome things to pretty much any sound you run through it. And that's giving it a lot of the vibe. If I take it off, right, huge difference. Then we have a compressor, and we have a plugin called Comet, which I've been messing around with lately. It's a reverb plugin by Polyverse. I love some of Polyverse's other plugins. I don't know how I feel about this yet, but hey, it is making it sound reverbed. So here's something you do to take it a step further. Sample out like a high C note like this, with your effects, with your processing, with the manipulated sound, and then load that up in something that can handle granular synthesis. So I'm going to pull up Pigments 2 for this. All right, so I loaded up Pigments, and in our engine 1, I chose sample. From there, we're going to need to turn on the granular engine or mode. If I don't, it's just going to play back like a sample. So let's turn that on now. Now, I don't want to turn this into a whole tutorial about grain-based synthesis techniques, but I'm going to go over a couple of the knobs here that I think are really important in Pigments, because I know a lot of people have this synth, and if you're following along, maybe you'll learn something cool about it, and you'll be able to use Pigments in the same way. So the main controls you need to be worried about are the start, sample start, basically, density, hertz, time, and this direction. So let's turn all these down quite low, and we'll play it. You might think that it would just play like a sampler, but it doesn't. It just runs out of steam and kind of just goes nowhere. And I'm playing chords right now, and it's not even playing those notes. The reason for that is only one grain is basically being created at a time. If you guys don't know what grains are in granular synthesis, think of it like this. Instead of playing back a whole sample, like this one shot, the granular synth engine is basically ripping apart that sample into really tiny pieces. If you think of it like a photo, you can kind of think of it as like pixels. And from there, it's building it back up based on these controls. So we need to turn this density knob up first. This is going to create more grains. The higher you go, the more grains are created. And you can see the grains, basically these little white lines that show up over the audio. Those are all the grains. Now, the density knob to the left of that is going to tell basically the engine how random to make those grains. So if you're getting like stuttering and pops and clicks, turn that up. And then I think it's important to not start right at the beginning, and I'll show you why in a second. You can actually have a granular engine in most synths start to scan behind your start point. So you can start a little bit into the sample and still catch some of the audio that's happening before your start point. All right, size time. This is important. This is going to set the duration of each of those grains that we're creating. So right now it's down at the very, very lowest it can go, which is 1 millisecond. So let's turn this up to maybe 34 milliseconds for each grain. Let's turn up a little bit higher. Right, so now it's nice and smooth. Now, the last control that I think you should definitely get acquainted with is this direction. This is going to determine where the grains are happening in terms of left or right of the sample start point. So right now we have it kind of going both. If we just do forward, you can see and hear the sound change a little bit. So you might be saying, well, wait, there's still stuff happening over here. That's basically because it's going like this and coming back around. Whereas if we go back to here, you'll see it. You'll see some of these lines moving forwards and backwards. So let's just do backwards. Right. I typically like a little bit of a combination of both, especially for one-shot samples like this. layer that with the one from our sampler. Right, kind of like a string / choral patch. Now let's go back into our sampler here and I'll show you the micro looping. So micro looping is where you're gonna find a really, really small portion of the sound. So our first sound, we just went with a normal loop within the sample. Now with micro looping, let's turn off the crossfade here. And let's go back to our normal speed. Okay, so this is kind of a micro loop. But you can get even smaller. You can go down to basically down to an individual cycle, and the tuning will get weird. It's kind of buzzy. And then you're gonna have to crossfade out. So that actually turned out way cooler than I thought I was going to. All right, so that's going to sum up this video. If you guys have any questions or comments, you can post those below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you guys aren't subscribed to our channel, you know the drill. Hit that subscribe button. The support really does mean a lot to us. And if you guys haven't ever checked out our website, echosoundworks.com, definitely head on over there. There's a ton of free content, samples, loops, and presets. And of course, there's some premium sound sets and sample packs as well. And lastly, if you guys use Instagram, consider giving us a follow. We run a lot of contests, giveaways, and promotions on that platform. And I think you guys will like what we're doing over there. All right, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.